company is losing over $1 billion per year, but he got paid.
Mehdi, that's dead wrong, and I would sorry to say you're embarrassing yourself in front of anybody who knows anything about biotech for knowing that phase 3 trials are the final stage.
Okay. Well, guess who's on the list of institutional investment giants that started giving his company money 1 year ago? You want to guess? BlackRock.
You want to know why BlackRock's the top shareholder of every American company that's publicly listed?
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be discussing the credibility of Vivek Ramaswamy. Is he the anti-establishment character that he says he is, or is he just another bought and paid for plant? Is he actually being controlled by some puppet masters and just saying what we want to hear? So what I'm going to be doing is playing some videos that were made by Vivek Ramaswamy Skeptics, and then following that up with some of the things that Vivek has said, and then giving some of my own thoughts as well. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to be letting you guys in on some of my personal behind the scenes dealings with Vivek and his team, things that I haven't actually shared before. And just before we get into the meat of things here, if anybody who I mentioned in this video in terms of the Vivek Ramaswamy Skeptics would like to come on my channel and challenge me about these matters and try and prove me wrong, then send me a message on Twitter or Instagram. You can find the links below. Bring your receipts and let's do it. I mean, Vivek is a guy who has earned millions of supporters and gotten a lot of traction over the last 12 months. And there is always that chance that he becomes Trump's running mate, or it looks likely as well that he will be a part of Trump's cabinet in some way. So it's important we do our due diligence. You guys who have been following the channel for a little while and have seen my other Vivek videos will know that I've already addressed a fair few of these topics with his interview with Anomaly, which was a great interview. You guys should watch that. And also the one he did with Mehdi Hassan. They both served him up very tough questions, and I thought that his responses were satisfactory. So from what I've seen of the skeptics, the charges that are leveled against Vivek are essentially something like this. They believe that he is a total fraud, a gold-toothed salesman that doesn't care about America at all, but is rather doing this for his own personal and financial gain. If you put the pieces of the puzzle together with the things that they're insinuating, they're essentially saying that because he received a Soros Foundation scholarship, was briefly named a young global leader at the World Economic Forum, and because BlackRock is heavily invested in his companies, that he has been groomed since college by these globalist elites to eventually run for president as a controlled vessel for the interests of these people. And now stranger things have happened, so let's get into it. I want to address a video by Matt Kim, who's a very intelligent guy, does some fine work, has a really good podcast, even had Tucker on his podcast, so you guys should check him out.
Vivek Ramaswamy, should you trust him? Some of you won't like this, but hear me out. He seems to be everywhere. Clips of him giving it to the man and calling out the establishment all over social media. Skyrockets from unknown to top of the Republican polls. And I understand why. He says what we all want to hear. End the war, secure the border, drain the swamp, unity, freedom, truth. Which outlets are considered untrustworthy propaganda media? MSNBC, Business Insider, AP, Forbes, the New York Times, the New Yorker, Huffington Post, Axios, Politico, just to name a few. The mouthpiece of the establishment. Then why are they all so supportive of Vivek? Doesn't make sense. How is he considered anti-establishment when he's supported by the establishment?
Now, just to let you know, this video was made towards the end of August in 2023, when Vivek's campaign was at a real high point and when he was really taking off and getting a lot of positive attention and praise. So it was a little while ago, but I've been tagged a fair few times on Twitter since then, so credit to Matt for making such an effective video. So in my observation, the mainstream media has not exactly been on Team Vivek. This article from Forbes says how Vivek Ramaswamy got richer while pumping millions into failed presidential campaign. New York Times talking about how Vivek Ramaswamy loves his heritage, just don't call him an Indian American. And also how Jimmy Fallon is ribbing him for embracing Trump. Not exactly overly positive there. Furthermore, MSNBC essentially calling him a failure and saying that his campaign was grim. And I could go on, but the point is that they haven't treated him as badly as Trump, but they certainly haven't been in his favor. He basically built his entire campaign off of going on mainstream media shows, absolutely destroying the anchors and using those clips to create momentum for himself through people like me on YouTube, and also to get them all over Twitter. Furthermore, like I've said previously, I believe that when Vivek went really hardline at the GOP debates about not funding the Ukraine war and also not funding Israel, this was the point where the mainstream media essentially started acting like he didn't exist and started really turning on him.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not support an increase of funding to Ukraine?
I would not. And I think that this is disastrous, that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States of America. All week,
you want
Nikki.
to go and defund Israel? You want to
okay, let me address that. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to address each of those right now.
And at this point, Nikki Haley started to ascend and started to become the darling girl of the mainstream media. And the things that Vivek was saying at these GOP debates, and that he's been saying all along for that matter, these things were not the rhetoric of a puppet and of a closet warmonger. This was the rhetoric of a radical outsider. And you could say that this is all just talk, and when he gets into the White House, he's going to do something totally different and he's going to start doing the bidding of his puppet masters. But the fact of the matter is that we don't know that. And I have trust issues with politics myself, but not quite that severe yet. So if you're looking for somebody who's controlled by puppet masters and who actually gets propped up by the media, look no further than Nikki Haley.
You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
And you know what? The foreign policy.
If you or I were to say some of the anti-woke things he says, we would be shadow banned. But somehow, he's trending on every single major social media platform.
So this is actually not a bad point, and I actually raised a similar point a few months ago when I started covering Vivek. I was actually suspicious as a YouTube creator that sees and observes trends and patterns about the kinds of numbers that my Vivek Ramaswamy videos were getting. But I've also noticed that Douglas Murray is equally as, if not more popular than Vivek when I cover him. Same with Candace Owens, same with Jordan Peterson. Just because somebody has an anti-woke message doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be shadow banned. YouTube is a business, and as much as they are woke sometimes and they have taken down accounts and they don't allow a lot of dissident right-wing voices, they're also a business and they understand that people want to tune in for individuals like Vivek, Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, and the rest. So whilst there are definitely narratives that I wouldn't necessarily talk about on YouTube, and whilst the leftist YouTube channels that genuinely suck get propped up a ridiculous amount, I would say it's reasonable to suggest that the reason why Vivek was trending so much was because he's an excellent speaker. He was owning people left, right, and center, and people just love watching that stuff. Now onto the part about his companies.
Prior to politics, he was a hedge fund manager. His claim to fame was a pharmaceutical startup company called Roivant. In the 9 years it's been in business, it has never been profitable or delivered a working product. Although Roivant continues to fail their clinical trials, they were able to find investors and raise money, making Vivek an extremely wealthy entrepreneur. Good at convincing people to invest, poor at delivering product and execution. Not a good sign. So what about the money? The media highlights that Vivek has invested over $10 million of his own money to fund his campaign, an honorable feat. Vivek announced his run for presidency in February 2023. How long do you think it takes to make that decision and execute a plan? 6, 8 months? July 2022, the value of Roivant stock is just over $3 per share. On February 21st, 2023, Vivek announces his run for presidency, and on February 22, he sells 4 million shares for approximately $32 million at nearly $8 per share. Well over $15 million in profit in 6 months prior to him announcing presidency. Good for him, right? Make that money. Company is losing over $1 billion per year, but he got paid. Smart guy.
Talk about your business background. Let's talk about that. You made your name and made a lot of your early big money from pushing an Alzheimer's drug that had already failed 4 clinical trials when you bought it. You then talked it up on CNBC, in Forbes, on the cover. Your company's subsidiary shot up by billions in value when it went public in 2015. But then the drug failed its phase 3 trial on your watch. The company lost 75% of its value in a single day. Ordinary investors like the California State Teachers Pension Fund lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you cashed out beforehand via your parent company to the tune of, I believe, over $37 million. Your critics say it's a classic pump and dump scheme. What do you say to them?
Yeah, Mehdi, that's the standard opposition research during politics reading line. Anybody in the biotech industry knows this story very well. 99.7% of Alzheimer's drugs have failed. That's thousands of drugs. Mine was one of them. But the company I founded, Roivant, developed a range of medicines. And the way I made my money was not through the failure of that Alzheimer's drug. This is one of the pieces of misinformation from opposition research. I could have sold shares in that subsidiary Alzheimer's company, but didn't. So the person who was hurt by that that was made.
Hold on.
But
you say this a lot, but you did sell shares in Roivant, and you made $37 million.
And Mehdi,
$37 million.
Mehdi, I think you owe it to your audience. Mehdi, I think you owe it to your audience to be accurate. That is shares in a different company, not Axovant. And those shares that I sold are worth, and those shares are worth dramatically more today. So I would have made more money had I held on to those shares. Don't believe what the opposition research purveys through the media.
It's not opposition research. We looked at your tax returns, which you very kindly have released.
Yeah, exactly.
And you made
voluntarily released. Because I want to be transparent.
You made 300 grand in 2014 on capital gains. In 2015, after the IPO of this Axovant, you made $37 million in capital gains. Yet others didn't make that kind of money.
After Mehdi, give me a break. After Roivant, the multi-billion-dollar business that developed 40-plus medicines, yes, I sold shares in that. And that business, if I may actually allow you to know how I made my money, developed 5 FDA-approved therapies that are now FDA-approved today.
After you sold
one of them is a life-saving therapy in kids.
When you were CEO,
Another one,
were they?
They were FDA. Actually, over the time that I developed them, we took them all the way through phase 3, and then we did a $3 billion deal that actually.
They were approved a year and a half later after you sold the company.
Yeah, so Mehdi, I'm not going to fault you for not knowing the first thing about biotech because that's not your job. But getting through phase 3 is the final stage of clinical testing before you hand in the application. Yes, my company did a $3 billion deal that actually did make money for those shareholders. And so, yes, I have built Roivant's a publicly traded company, nearly $10 billion public company today that I built as the sole founder from scratch as one of several companies that I've built. So, yes, I have a business record that I'm proud of. Our success rate under my watch was higher than probably nearly 99.9% of biotech startups in the last decade. So, yeah, I stand by that record. I'm not afraid of taking risks. That's part of the American spirit, and I stand by it.
Technically, the successes were a year and a half after you sold the company, but we'll get bogged down. Let's talk politics.
Mehdi, that's dead wrong, and I would sorry to say you're embarrassing yourself in front of anybody who knows anything about biotech for knowing that phase 3 trials are the final stage.
Okay.
The final stage, the FDA phase 3 studies succeeded. So you're barking up the wrong tree, but we can continue to move on.
But anytime things are just so coincidental, I'm forced to keep digging. Why did the stock price of an unprofitable, failing company rise over 100%? How does it go from an all-time low to nearly its all-time high? Institutional money. You remember when Vivek said the financial investment giants like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard represent arguably the most powerful cartel in human history? Well, guess who's on the list of institutional investment giants that started giving his company money 1 year ago? You want to guess? BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. All three have added to their positions in the last quarter, and Roivant, which Vivek still owns 7% share in, is now up over 300% in the last year, making it worth close to $1 billion. During the Republican primary debate, Vivek vowed to end the teachers' union. Guess who is also on this list of investors? California State Teachers Retirement System.
Speaking of BlackRock, Newsweek reported recently that while you've been openly vocal against ESG policies, that Roivant, your company's major institutional investors, include Morgan Stanley, Viking Global, and BlackRock, the very firms he criticizes, are among his largest stakeholders, owning over 500 million shares in your company.
It's hilarious, right? So you want to know?
It is, yeah.
And the thing that makes it hilarious is that people have to know how the system works, right? Don't be duped by anybody. You want to know why BlackRock's the top shareholder of every American company that's publicly listed? The company I founded is listed on the stock exchange. Well, you want to know the way it works is BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard automatically own your companies, whether or not you have a choice in the matter. You don't choose your shareholders as a public company.
Look, his intentions may be pure, and this is all a coincidence. Maybe there's a great explanation. However, I am not a financial analyst nor investigative reporter, but I was able to find all this out in a couple hours of sifting through publicly available data. Why is his connection to George Soros via a scholarship and his involvement in the Ohio COVID-19 response team scrubbed from Wikipedia? In 2021, he was named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. 2 years later, after using that title to raise investments for his company, he sued the WEF to remove his name from the list. 3 months after that, he was able to settle with Klaus Schwab's WEF and receive a formal letter of apology. How do you sue what many may consider evil, the World Economic Forum, and win and get an apology letter in 3 months? He's either that good or, I don't know. Any real journalist or news outlet could have easily found out all this info, but they didn't. Real question is, why?
Now, guys, maybe this has flown over my head and maybe I'm missing the whole point, but if you think you're onto something when you say that BlackRock and Vanguard are heavily invested in a major public company, if that's meant to be somehow shocking, then I'll share some stats with you guys. I just picked out a few companies that I know and had a look at their shareholders. And as you can see, here's Google. You can see BlackRock and Vanguard, the major shareholders. Apple, same with them. BlackRock, Vanguard, major shareholders. Same goes for ExxonMobil, Vanguard and BlackRock, and even Home Depot. Their largest shareholders are Vanguard and BlackRock. And then when you look at Roivant, which is Vivek's company, you can see that BlackRock is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th in line. So compared to the other big companies, Roivant don't really have that much investment from BlackRock. And like Matt said, I too am no financial analyst, and I'd be lying if I said I knew the first thing about it. So I'm happy to be proved wrong on this one. But what I will say is that if this is a big fraud, and Vivek Ramaswamy is in fact a puppet of BlackRock, of George Soros, and of the WEF, that would be the greatest troll ever perpetrated. And it would show that these guys actually have an amazing sense of humor. Here's how I imagine it going down. You got Larry, George, and Klaus just sitting around smoking cigars, shooting the shit, talking about chicks, world domination, and saying, we've got this brown guy who ticks all the diversity boxes. What can we make him say to the Republican base that they all want to hear? George Soros, okay, I got one. Let's make him really strict on border control. Good one, Georgie boy. Okay. How funny would this be? Let's make him call out BlackRock and the other candidates with big donors. Okay, boys, Uncle Klaus has a funny. We should make him say that the climate change is a hoax. Okay, and what should his slogan be? Okay, let Klaus answer this one. How about his slogan is truth? Anyways, jokes aside, I think that the concerns are valid. However, there's speculation at the end of the day. What I think that some of these people don't really get about how the upper echelons of society works is that they all kind of know each other and they all kind of move around in the same circles. They come up through the same high schools and then colleges, and they run in the same circles in the city where they work for the banks and corporations and financial institutions. They attend the same conferences, etc. And if you want to know more about this, then look at how many British prime ministers went to Oxford. And funnily enough, this is actually best described, in my opinion, by one of Vivek's most loud and proud critics, a very intelligent and accomplished man who is also running for president named Shiva Ayadurai. He calls it the swarm. So I think that if you're a prodigiously talented orator and probably a genius, you went to Ivy League colleges and then you start up $1 billion public company, you're going to have something to do with BlackRock. They literally own everything. And now in regard to the Soros Foundation scholarship that he received.
So at the time I applied for that scholarship, yeah, I didn't have that. And my parents had not earned big time money. So the fall of 2010 when I applied, absolutely. Now at the year end 2010, December 31st, for people in the finance industry, that's when you know that was a biggest paycheck by an order of magnitude I've ever gotten. And then 2011, it just kept going up from there. But the other thing I'll say is, to anybody else who's young and receiving advice, even if you have $1 million in the bank account and somebody gives you a $50,000 scholarship, yeah, take it. Don't take it if there's strings attached and they say you can't say certain things. Turn down that money. But yeah, if you have $1 million and somebody gives you 50 grand more and you earned it, go for it and take it too. Turns out though that that wasn't even the position I was in. It was the following year, and you want to match up the tax returns, do the facts right. The reason I've done it is so that everybody else has full transparency. And so I just think it's important that people understand that.
Well, just real quick before we move on, the Fox Digital News report says you made over $1 million 3 years prior, and then that year you made 2.2. So, I mean, if you say, if you get free money, take it, that's one thing. If you say I don't have the money, that's fair.
Well, to tell you the truth, compared to where I am right now, put yourself in it wasn't a need-based scholarship. It's a merit scholarship. But I'd say that, you know what? I am wealthy now. Okay. I was not wealthy by the standards that I used to judge that back then. And yes, $50,000 meant a heck of a lot to me when I was 24 years old. All right. You can look up my tax returns post-tax, the way you accumulate it. Had I earned a few $100,000? Yes. Leading up to that, did it become millions later and hundreds of millions later? Yes, it did. At the age of 24, it wasn't. $50,000 meant a lot to me, and I was smart to take it, and I would advise any other young person to do the same thing.
I'll keep this brief because George Soros doesn't pay me nearly enough to cover this one in depth. I mean, this one doesn't look great, but just like before, if you are a prodigiously talented young person of color, then you're going to attract the attention of these types of foundations. And if you're offered 50 grand, I don't care if you've already got $1 million in the bank. You should take it because you got to do what you got to do to get ahead in life, and that is free money. That's called just being smart. Unless, of course, he signed a deal that says his soul now belongs to these elites, or he did a bloodletting ceremony, or promised to give George Soros his firstborn child. I would say that the smart thing to do, if it's just a free 50 grand, is take the cheddar. And with all of this in mind, I still tend to think that the most suspicious thing about Vivek that I've seen is how similar he sounds to Obama.
Never been a Democratic or Republican idea.
These are not Democrat ideas or Republican ideas.
This is an American idea.
These are fundamentally American ideals.
Imagine they were driving a car and they drove it into the ditch.
If somebody has repeatedly crashed your car,
You can't have the keys back.
do you want to turn over the keys to the same people who crashed it?
He said Russia in the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back.
I have a newsflash. The USSR does not exist anymore.
You know, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
It fell back in 1990.
A skinny guy with a funny name.
Who the heck is this skinny guy with a funny last name?
But they sense deep in their bones.
I believe deep in my bones, deep over the
Out of many, one. We are one people.
I have a dream that we can be one people again.
I mean, it's eerily similar, but rather than saying that he has the same handlers as Obama or whatever, you could just as easily say that he's studied Obama carefully. He's looked at what was effective for Obama and he's gone and taken that and used it himself. He would have done the same thing with Trump and manipulating the media to get himself attention and traction. That's the smart thing to do. You have to study the people who have excelled in your field. And so with that, guys, I certainly do get the suspicion. However, I've seen these accusations leveled at just about everyone. I've seen people say this about Bobby Kennedy, that he's a product of a crime family and an elitist that is completely out of touch with the regular person. You can hear tales about how Trump is a Zionist shill that is completely controlled by Israel, and that's why he signed the Abraham Accords and moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Somebody will tell you that Tucker Carlson is a CIA agent, or how Elon Musk is the Antichrist. And don't get me wrong, guys, I have dived deep into all these theories. I love hearing about it just as much as the next man. And hey, some of them may well be true. But in order to keep some semblance of order in my own brain and in the political discourse, whilst a healthy skepticism is obviously necessary, I do think that we must operate on what we know to be true and go from there. Maybe I'm just hopelessly naive, but I like to have some level of faith in the system that already exists, rather than jumping to extreme conclusions based on circumstantial evidence. I'm a big admirer of the way that Tucker Carlson does things, for example. I think that he's more based than any of us even know, but he waits until he has the proper evidence and when he's pretty damn sure that a story is true before he goes and reports about it. If you believe everything you hear about every person in public life, you're just going to spend all of your time going down pretty dark and deep wormholes that oftentimes just aren't true. And now just a little bit about my own personal experiences with Vivek and his team. As you guys may know, a few months ago, I interviewed Vivek and I was talking to his team for months and months in advance, trying to organize a time. They actually reached out to me and they said that they liked my content. And then I just threw it out there and asked if I could potentially get Vivek on the channel. And to my surprise, they said that we could organize it. And then it was an interesting experience when we eventually did make the interview happen, because I was waiting for about 20 minutes or so whilst Vivek was on the phone, which obviously I don't care about because he's running for president and I have a measly little YouTube channel and hierarchies are real. But when the interview commenced, Vivek really didn't seem himself. It was like he was having a really tough day, and I eventually later found out that he'd been sick for the past few days, so a little bit of bad timing. And I was actually going to put some race jokes in my question, but then I didn't end up doing it because he seemed super duper serious, and I was actually a bit taken aback by it. It was almost like he had his guard up a little bit because he literally had no idea who I was. He walked into the room and I heard him say to his producers, "So who is this guy?" Which was great. Maybe he thought that I was somebody who was going to throw some accusations at him or challenge him. I don't know. Regardless though, the fact that he and his team made time for me was an enormous honor. None of the other candidates were available to the normal person like myself to talk to. So what Vivek did during his campaign was completely unprecedented. And the fact that he had no idea who I was and he sat straight down in the chair and started talking to me showed that it doesn't really matter who is across from him. He's happy to field any questions, and he's not afraid of ideas, and he's not afraid of a debate. So with all that in mind, I do trust Vivek, I trust his team, and until I'm given a reason not to, with proof, then I will continue to do so. And I believe that the things that he's said really align with me and my views. I like how he's carried himself, and I also really like the policies that he was putting forward. I think that that is positive, and I think that his campaign was a net positive. So like I said before, if anybody that's been mentioned in this video or that has a reasonably large platform wants to come on and challenge me about this, then I obviously welcome that. I know I missed out on how his rhetoric has changed over the years, maybe a few other points about his companies or nefarious looking relationships. I'm open to being challenged about it all. So guys, as per usual, find me below. And if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, click right here. If you'd like to watch another video, click right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.